Hi guys, Paul from the innovation community here. Today I'm with Denholm Hesse. Now, Denholm is currently the head of data engineering and analytics at M&G, helping investment to become more data driven. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, likewise, good to have you. Just tell us a bit about yourself in a few words.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Denholm. I head up data engineering and analytics at M&G. I've been here 2 years now. Before that, I was actually in consulting, so worked at Deloitte, kind of working always across financial services, but kind of leading analytics projects. And actually, Prudential was was my last client, and Prudential and M&G merged, right? So here I am. So yeah, analytics is what I've been working in kind of since the beginning of my career, and found myself in M&G.
And where did your data career really start?
So I think, I guess so technically it started at Deloitte. I think the kind of interest in it started at university for sure. I actually didn't do a kind of really technical degree. I didn't study data or computer science or kind of engineering or anything like that. But actually it was always, for me, was kind of how data can kind of change people's minds, right, and kind of influence decisions. So it's almost more of a bit of a psychological kind of standpoint that I started kind of getting interested in data. And then when I was at Deloitte, it was around the time that they kind of started Deloitte Digital, and they set up a customer analytics team, and kind of got into like data and visualizations more specifically.
And how has that evolved now to your current role?
Quite a lot, I would say. So the beginning, I really didn't spend too much time being hands-on, which is kind of unique, I think. So I probably did kind of a couple of years, and it was very much kind of building dashboards, and I was always kind of closer to the kind of business stakeholders side of things. So kind of playing back what's the story and the insight from the data. So I think I kind of moved from doing some kind of simple development stuff, right, in dashboards, to now very much a kind of strategic role. How do we build teams? How do we get the best out of kind of really smart data scientists, data engineers across a group? What's the kind of infrastructure and platform that they need to be successful? So the roles kind of change in that sense, less from kind of micro kind of decisions and thinking about kind of tasks and in the moment, to kind of broader, how do we look at kind of 12-month plus type plans and delivery there.
And what are you up to in your current role with M&G?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Lots of things, right? So I suppose within M&G, I sit within a part of the business called customer and distribution. So M&G has kind of two angles to it, right? It's almost a savings and investment side. So almost the more traditional piece that came with Prudential UK, which is pensions, ISAs, products that we might buy, right? And then there's the asset management part of the business with funds and investments and working with institutions and kind of wholesale organizations, right? So what we're really doing is kind of building out a data platform across that piece. And we kind of look at it in kind of three products or propositions that we provide. So one is obviously kind of self-serve analytics, dashboards. How can we get data into the hands of the business so they can make the right decisions? Another piece is around how do we actually kind of safely provision data to people? So there may be people there are people right within the business who have much better domain knowledge on their business area than a centralized kind of analytics team would ever have. But also have some technical skills. So if you can give them clean, trusted data, they can squeeze a load of value out of that data. So we try and provision data obviously safely and securely. And the final piece kind of lends itself a little bit more to data science, but how do we kind of embed analytics in journeys, whether that's for clients, advisors, or our kind of colleagues, right, in call centers and things like that. So that's kind of broadly what we're working on, yeah.
So you mentioned that the interest really started at university. What has kept your interest about working with data this whole time?
So still, I still love the moment, right, where you can change someone's mind or you can kind of solidify a decision through data. That really is it for me. I think we always need to think about what's the kind of reason that we're doing some analysis. It always has to be hinged on a challenge or a problem or, something that we're trying to solve or prove, right? So, and I think quite often we're taught that kind of changing our minds is a bad thing, right? And it's really not. I think data can help us learn if we ask the right questions of it. So I think that's what I really like, and I think it kind of changes people's attitudes, right? There was a time when people didn't want to wear seatbelts in cars because they thought they would get stuck. But data proves, right, that that's not correct. You're far safer with a seatbelt on, and that's kind of how things change, right? So slowly but surely, data can change people's minds.
Absolutely. So, in your opinion, what are some of the major successes that you've achieved over your career?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, these sorts of questions are always better for other people, aren't they, when you ask them about me? But I think the thing that I'm really proud of at M&G, right, is we when I first joined, it was Prudential, and it was kind of the wealth part of the business there, and there wasn't a centralized or dedicated analytics team. So I've kind of built that from scratch, hiring, thinking about ways of working. And that's kind of a lot of work, right? Kind of setting up and setting the right habits in, making sure you've got the right skill set on the pitch, you've got the right infrastructure to allow those people to be successful. Thinking about the analytics kind of mandate and mission that we've got at M&G. So I'd say that's kind of the biggest thing I think that's the success, and I think I see that illustrated in the kind of changing attitudes towards data across the business. There's less challenge, I suppose, on numbers. There used to kind of be a bit of well, how do you know that this is right, and how can we be confident in the data that you're providing? And that's kind of changing, right, over time, and also kind of moving along the classic data-driven maturity type curves from building pretty much purely dashboards and giving people eyes and ears and understanding what's happening across the business, to moving into a bit more of a kind of like how can we actually utilize advanced analytics and data science to help influence decisions.
That's a good point to bring up, because a lot of people really struggle with building a high performing analytics team, especially in terms of, okay, we've got a project, someone needs some sort of data for the business, it's done now. How do you set up a high performing analytics team that has a continuous improvement mindset?
It's a really good question. It's really important, right? We spend a lot of time thinking about this. And so we try and think about it as like an engine of continuous improvement. So you set up the right kind of mechanisms and get the team bought into those. So we work in Scrum, and that's a big part of it. So sprint planning, story point estimations, retrospectives. But we also do things like health checks, which we do right across the technology team at M&G. So kind of looking at retrospectives tend to look purely at sprints, right? So you look back at the last 2 weeks and you say, what could be done better? What's gone really well, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, sometimes there's bigger things or things that are kind of over a longer period of time that you might not tackle in a traditional retrospective. And they can still be quick wins. So those sorts of things are really important, I think, setting up the right sessions. I think the other thing is about, and especially if you're starting up a new function, right, is getting the good habits in early. So things like documentation and transparency and reproducibility, right? When you're writing a piece of code for an ad hoc question, write it in a way where it can be rerun, so we don't have to do those things again. So all of the kind of small decisions as well, I think, are really powerful in making sure that you're constantly progressing.
And where do you see the role that technology is playing for helping the wider organization really get bought in?
Yeah, massive. Obviously, you can't do analytics without technology, right? Be very difficult. But so I think there's, I mean, clearly there's I mean, we utilize open source a lot, right? So things, Python is great for that sort of stuff. So we really kind of harness that. I think the modern kind of visualization tools, Power BI, Tableau, those sorts of tools are all really powerful in kind of putting information in people's hands and still giving them some flexibility to kind of slice and dice and explore the data at their fingertips. So kind of all of that technology works. You then think about, I touched on provision data earlier. And so how do we actually provision data through APIs so that individuals can access them through different types of applications, whether that's a CRM or part of the marketing stack, I think is really powerful. So constantly evolving, but central and a really key thing, I think, for our success as an analytics team and bringing that to the organization.
Absolutely. So, what do you think the biggest impact that you made on a past transformation was?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so I think a big part is we're going through a digital transformation now, like a lot of companies, right? So lots of change work happening, and I think there's a few different ways in which we have an impact. One is we help people make decisions through that change, so everybody is working in an agile manner, right? So actually having information to base those decisions on is really, really important. And then seeing immediately what's the effects of the change that I have made. So when we deliver a new digital journey, can we understand where customers or advisors are dropping off of that journey? So we can understand, where there's friction. In some cases, you might want there to be friction, right? We're talking about kind of long-term savings here. So it's not, you don't want kind of people rushing through to the basket like you might think about in kind of more traditional business to consumer model. So I think kind of giving people information has a massive impact, really difficult to measure. Then I think some of the work where you can kind of measure that more tangibly is kind of in the models, right? When you're talking about cross-sell kind of impacts, I think traditionally on a kind of on the insurance side, you'll have a back book of business within financial services that you'll try and leverage and kind of offer a broader range of products to.
So you mentioned that M&G are going through a digital transformation, and like a lot of companies, as you said, where do you currently see the biggest opportunity for improvement?
Across the whole transformation, or with regards to analytics in there?
Let's say both.
Yeah, nice. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, right? I think that M&G is so broad, right? So you've got kind of almost these two business models. So I think one of the biggest opportunities, I think, is how do you, and it's not easy, but how do you leverage kind of the lessons learned right across the business, rather than just within teams? I think that's a big opportunity for most companies. I think in the analytics space, I think one of the great things about a digital transformation is we kind of we'll invest in kind of some modern parts of the tech stack, right? So modern CRMs, modern kind of web platforms that enable us to connect to them and pull data down a lot more easily, versus some of the legacy systems that were set up in 1980s and things like that are incredibly difficult to get data out and never really thought of as data sources. It was just an operational type database that was used to manage transactions and things like that. So I think the digital transformation will provide a load of opportunities in both the data that we collect and the service that we can provide back to our end consumers.
Awesome stuff. So when you're dealing with your team, how would you describe your leadership style?
Again, this is another great question for the team, isn't it? They can comment. I think this is probably the wrong term, so hopefully my manager doesn't listen, but quite laissez-faire. I'm quite laid back. So I think autonomy is really, really important, particularly in a team that is really technical. So they don't want and need me, and I'm not the best person to kind of guide them on every single technical decision that they're making day to day. So I think we have a really open kind of conversations. And again, I mentioned the engine of continuous improvement earlier. That's really the main touch points I have with the team. And then it's kind of day-to-day conversations on helping them kind of unblock things and kind of progress some of the broader topics like kind of how do we accelerate kind of the migration to cloud and those sorts of activities. So yeah, I think my leadership style is kind of definitely centered around autonomy. The team can kind of make decisions, and I will try and tackle those kind of macro things that make their lives easier, basically.
Full empowerment. I like it.
Yeah.
So I guess a big part of digital transformation is updating and communicating also with senior leadership outside of the analytics team as well. So what are some of the ways that you do that and communicate the vision, but also the successes?
Yeah. So again, I think transparency is really important here. we've always, I've got a really great relationship with kind of the senior leaders here. And I think over time, right, as you deliver more, I've been here 2 years, kind of trust and confidence grows. So we touch base pretty regularly. It's one of the things that's quite nice that M&G do as a whole is we kind of have a kind of Slack channels where we like to celebrate and share updates across the team. And the David McMillan, who's the Chief Customer and Distribution Officer, so on the board, right, is in that Slack channel, and he will be commenting on that Slack channel, adding emojis to people's updates and things like that, right? So it's really easy to communicate to senior leadership. I think it's, I mentioned the kind of transparency piece. I think it's obviously easy to communicate the good news. I think where we have challenges and where we need support, the team are really great. And that's where I think transparency is really helpful. So yeah, kind of regular touch points on things like Slack. And then, yeah, honest conversations, right, when they're required on broader topics.
Sounds like a good idea. Slack's a really useful tool, and it's free as well, which is great. How has COVID-19 affected your role?
Yeah, I mean, I work from home a lot now. So kind of in terms of location and travel, that's massively reduced, which is really interesting. In terms of kind of the broader picture, not too much, to be honest. I mean, we obviously have a lot more kind of ad hoc questions around what's the impact of COVID on kind of our assets under management, and more people going online, what's happening with kind of impact on the call centres, particularly at the beginning, right, when there was a lot more kind of hysteria around it, right, and people were kind of wondering what's going to happen, and people's financial security kind of gets raised, right, in these moments. You start to think, am I going to lose all of my money because of an economic downturn? So there's been lots of things where we've looked at analysis there. But again, in terms of the broader picture, not massively. The mission and everything and the direction stays the same. It's actually been one of the things that I'm really grateful of, is that the change work hasn't stopped. So it hasn't been a case of furloughing, which is really nice that the company is in that position. It has been a case of all this change work that we had committed to before COVID is still going to happen, because we know that it's the right direction. It's the right thing for us as a business and for our clients and customers. So that's been really, really awesome.
And no one has said that they missed the commute yet, which is good.
You know what? I miss one thing about the commute. I used to read about 2 books a month, because my commute is about 40 minutes each way. So I was kind of reading a lot, and then since lockdown I've done 0 reading. So that's the only thing I miss about the commute. I don't miss the cram trains or waking up super early.
For sure. What was the biggest mistake you made during your career?
Good question. I think I would have, I guess kind of early on in my career, I probably shied away from too much of kind of getting into detail of some of the technical work, I think. So like building out dashboards was kind of where I kind of capped myself. I didn't really believe that I could learn kind of some of the other technical pieces around data engineering and data science. I kind of thought, I'll leave that to the people who know more. But I think that would have been cool. I think I would have been a bit braver and asked more questions and been more curious. And I might have had kind of another complementary skill set that could have been useful now. But yeah, that's probably it. I don't think in terms of strategy and direction we've made kind of any mistakes. There's been pieces of work that have taken longer than expected. That's kind of natural, right? You go into things with some unknowns, and that's the risk that you take. But yeah, I think probably just at the kind of the beginning of my career, would have been quite cool, I think, to get into some more of the technical work at that stage.
What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
I think, do you know what, when you ask that question, it's kind of like, oh, you need to have a quote almost, isn't it? Like what someone said to you. But actually, I think the thing that's really inspired me, and I've had some really great kind of leaders that I've worked with, is just kind of knowing that they trust me. so I think trust is a really important thing, and I won't know the kind of exact words that people have said, but the things that kind of leaders have given me, particularly kind of early days within Deloitte, where they've said, you can, this is a situation that you can manage, that you can handle, and they kind of support you within there. I think is really, really important. So I think kind of believing in yourself, I suppose, and knowing that asking questions is the right, I think is.
Fantastic stuff. Apologies for the internet connection there. What does your routine look like?
No worries. What do they look like? So we've got a kind of a broad range of skills, I suppose, if I start there. So we have people who work kind of more on the digital analytics side. So kind of Adobe Analytics, Google Analytics type skill set. Then we have kind of people along the spectrum of data engineering through to kind of pure data science, I suppose. So a really strong team, working really hard on diversity and inclusion. So we're kind of really keen that we make sure we have the right balance in terms of kind of gender, but backgrounds as well. So we've got a team in terms of location. We've got kind of London, Edinburgh, and Mumbai. So people from kind of a variety of backgrounds, and the gender diversity is improving over time. There's still work that we need to do for sure within that space, but that's something that's really important for me, and it's kind of on our agenda. Where we're working hard in terms of our recruitment pipelines and all of that, and kind of getting involved in the community with women in data and girls in data. So all of those things are really important to us, and kind of shaping the way that the team looks and getting diversity of thought across the team.
What's your top working from home tip?
Top working from home tip. Go for a walk in the morning, I think. Get outside. Do not wake up and go straight downstairs to your desk. Get outside, get some fresh air, free the mind, and then settle into a powerful day of work.
And what are you curious about right now?
The future is probably too vague. I'm curious about kind of how this industry will change. How many of the things like working from home, like reduced travel, will be kind of here for the long term. I kind of have a belief that they will be. We've got some really big ambitions here around decarbonisation. Travel is obviously a big part of carbon emissions. So I'm really kind of curious to see, not just within M&G, but kind of, do people go back to business travel? Do people kind of go back to their old ways of working 5 days a week in the office? And actually, can we start to realise that people can be innovative and collaborative from home as well, and in remote locations, and kind of working from anywhere?
And you mentioned that you were reading 2 books a month before lockdown. Who's your most recent favourite author or book?
I'm going to try and say his name. So David Spiegelhalter. He's a statistician. He's doing a lot of work on the COVID data, actually. So he's a really good one to follow on Twitter, The Art of Statistics, which was one of the most recent kind of data books that I read. It's just kind of, there's bits of it, right, which are just amazingly complex, but he's explaining them in the simplest form possible, right? So he is a really, really clever person, but he kind of always brings it back to kind of making sure that you are asking the right questions of your data, and you're not kind of letting kind of human assumptions and things like that kind of weave their way into the algorithms, and therefore provide kind of misleading insights to people. So when I saw he was kind of part of the statistics task force for COVID, that gave me some comfort, because he's a clever man.
It's making complex ideas clear. I think that's a pretty good endorsement.
Yeah,
what advice would you give for aspiring leaders in data?
Kind of, I think always lead with what are the things that you're trying to solve. Yeah, always lead with the things that you're trying to solve. One of the things that really frustrates me is there's too much kind of starting with AI, machine learning, big data. I think those things are great, right? Extremely powerful, massively important. We utilize them here at M&G, but you've got to utilize them at the right time, and it means nothing if you're not solving your company's biggest challenge, right? So you will get pressure from in some cases, right, from senior stakeholders who want to be able to shout and say we're doing AI and machine learning because it's kind of leading edge. But the way that data can have, you need to find the way for data to have the biggest impact possible. So what is the most important thing that you should be working on within your organization? That's what you should be championing. So that would be the first one. I think the second one is, I always act as kind of the umbrella for the team. So stop the kind of noise getting into the team. If you are running a data engineering or a data science team, the chances are that you have some really incredibly smart people within that team who are really highly skilled, highly trained. To give them that air cover, right? Let them do what they do best and try and take away kind of the work that's maybe not very. There's a great blog by a lady called Tanya, that kind of stuff, which is kind of work that has to happen, but doesn't necessarily get recognized all of the time. I think managers should pick up the majority of that to keep their team working on high value pieces of work.
Great advice from Denholm Hesse from M&G. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.